Hello, welcome to BEH 107, Mental Health Disorders. In today's PowerPoint, we're going to be discussing personality disorders. So, before we get into the specific personality disorders, let's go over a general definition. These are disorders that consist of inflexible, long-standing, maladaptive traits that cause significantly impaired functioning or great distress in one's personal and social life. These behaviors are egosyntonic, meaning the behaviors and patterns are consistent with the ego integrity of the individual and are therefore perceived to be appropriate by the individual. In other words, they don't see anything wrong with what they're doing. So there are 10 distinct types of personality disorders listed in the DSM. Paranoid personality disorder, schizoid personality disorder, schizotypal personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, avoidant personality disorder, dependent personality disorder, obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, and antisocial personality disorder. So we're going to talk about each one of these individually, starting with the idea of when do these actually begin. The onset of these patterns of behavior can typically be traced back to late adolescence and the beginning of adulthood, and in some very rare instances, childhood. Contributing factors include troubled childhoods, childhood problems that continue on into adulthood, maladaptive or poor personal relationships, keeping in mind that the word maladaptive is from the idea of we adapt to a situation, and the word mal is a French word meaning bad, so we adapt in a bad way to a situation. And finally, extreme abnormal behaviors. A 1999 study of almost 639 New York State families, followed for almost 20 years, examined the relationship between childhood experiences of sexual and physical abuse and personality disorder symptoms. The study found that children with documented instances of childhood abuse or neglect were more than 4 times as likely to develop a personality disorder in early adulthood, according to the research. So clearly there is some correlations between childhood abuse and neglect and these personality disorders. The other thing that I always want to make sure people understand is that we're all at times displaying some personality disorders that are not always things we're proud of. And we can all meet some of these characteristics once in a while. But to meet the diagnostic requirement of a personality disorder, these traits must be inflexible. In other words, they have to be regularly observed without regard to time, place, or circumstance. Furthermore, these traits must cause functional impairment. Functional impairment means these traits interfere with a person's ability to function well in society. So if you get a little nutty when you have too many cocktails, that's just being a sloppy drunk. On the other hand, if you have a serious issue all the time, that's more likely to be a situation where you want to pursue a therapeutic intervention. So there's some patterns that you would identify with a personality disorder. And again, it is an enduring pattern of inner experience and behavior. This pattern manifests in 2 or more of the following areas: thinking, feeling, interpersonal relationships, impulse control. A person must demonstrate significant and enduring difficulties in at least two of these four areas. Personality disorders are not usually diagnosed in children because of the requirements that personality disorders represent enduring problems across time. So a 7-year-old who is problematic for a few months does not represent a problem across a significant amount of time. So let's start with paranoid personality disorder. And this is when a person displays a pattern of distrust, suspiciousness, and perceiving others as having evil motives. People with this disorder assume that others are out to harm them, take advantage of them, or humiliate them in some way. They put a lot of effort into protecting themselves and keeping their distance from others. They are known to preemptively attack others whom they feel threatened by. And the general estimate is about 4% of the general population. People with paranoid personality disorder also tend to hold grudges, are litigious, display pathological jealousy, and for these reasons they do not confide in others, do not allow themselves to develop close relationships, and their emotional life tends to be dominated by distrust and hostility. These are people who just don't trust anyone. Moving on to the Schizoid personality disorder, these folks are characterized by a pervasive pattern of social detachment and a restricted range of emotional expression. People with this disorder tend to be socially isolated. They don't seem to seek out or enjoy close relationships. They almost always choose solitary activities and seem to take little pleasure in life, and about 3% of the general population. Schizoid personality disorders, people often prefer mechanical or abstract activities that involve very little human interaction and appear indifferent to both criticism and praise. Emotionally, they may seem aloof, detached, and cold. They may be oblivious to social cues, causing them to appear socially inept and superficial. Their restricted emotional range and failure to reciprocate gestures or facial expressions, such as smiles or nods of agreement, cause them to appear dull or inattentive. So this is somebody who is so focused in on their own thoughts and issues in their own world, they seem detached from the outside world. Moving on, we have then the Schizotypal personality disorder, which, in a shorthand version, if you take paranoid personality disorder, add schizoid personality disorder, you get something akin to schizotypal personality disorder. These folks demonstrate a severe social anxiety, paranoia, and often unconventional beliefs. People with this disorder feel extreme discomfort with maintaining close relationships with people, mainly because they think their peers harbor negative thoughts towards them, so they avoid forming them. They often have peculiar speech mannerisms and odd modes of dress, which are also symptoms of this disorder. Approximately 3 to 5% of the general population, with slightly more men than women being diagnosed. Then we move into borderline personality disorder. And the diagnostic criteria for this personality disorder is very unique in terms of this is a disorder that usually is manifest during a relationship. Feelings radically shift from positive to negative, generally after disappointment or the perceived threat of losing someone. Self-image can also change rapidly from extremely positive to extremely negative. If you say to somebody, "Hey, your hair looks really good today," they may get very upset that you think their hair looked terrible yesterday. Impulsive behaviors are common, including alcohol or drug abuse, unsafe sex, gambling, and recklessness in general. Individuals with borderline personality disorder seek intimacy, but can be hyper alert to signs of rejection or not being valued and tend towards being insecure, ambivalent, or having paranoid patterns in relationships. And this is 2 to 3% of the population. People with borderline personality disorder will characteristically experience great distress when they cannot easily control and may subsequently engage in self-destructive behaviors as they do their best to cope with situations. So, for example, if your spouse forgets an anniversary, usually you get into a fight, you cry, or she cries, and people get over it. But for someone with borderline personality disorder, they may believe their spouse no longer loves them. They may accuse them of having an affair. The behavior may escalate to the person conducting self-harm, such as cutting or attempting suicide. People with borderline personality go from 0 to 100 in 3 seconds. They go from being calm and somewhat you would call normal to over the top, over little things. And that is a huge indicator of someone who's unable to balance the positive and the negative. Next, we're moving on to histrionic personality disorder, which is characterized by excessive emotionality and attention seeking. Their lives are filled with drama. They are uncomfortable when they are not the center of attention. Often they act quite flirtatiously or seductively and like to dress in a manner that draws attention to themselves. They are flamboyant and theatrical, exhibiting an exaggerated degree of emotional expression. However, their emotional expression is shallow and lacking in detail. This gives them the appearance of being disingenuous and insincere. 2% of the general population. The best way to explain what a histrionic personality disorder is, if you've ever watched the show RuPaul's drag show, the drag race, where they have the drag queens competing and how they go over the top with their emotionality. Well, it's kind of like that, except these people are not drag queens. These are people who are living their everyday lives. And it's just out of context. And it seems odd because you don't expect people to act like that on a normal basis. Then we move into narcissistic personality disorder, which is a long-term pattern of abnormal behavior characterized by exaggerated feelings of self-importance, an excessive need for admiration, and a lack of understanding of others' feelings. The diagnostic criteria include a sense of identity, which is an exaggerated self-appraisal and excessive need for affirmation from others, or goal setting, which is based on gaining approval from others and seeing oneself as exceptional, a feeling of entitlement. And they lack empathy, which is the inability to recognize or identify the feelings and needs of others. They engage in superficial relationships that serve to increase self-esteem. And in terms of personality traits, they tend to be self-centered. They believe in their superiority. They are condescending to others, and they have the excessive need to be the center of attention. So if you have seen a movie like American Psycho with Christian Bale, his character, Patrick Bateman, is a perfect example of a narcissistic personality. Then we have an avoidant personality disorder, which is a condition characterized by a lifelong pattern of extreme shyness, feelings of inadequacy, and a sensitivity to rejection. About 2 to 2.5% of the general population. The criteria for diagnosis includes low self-esteem, being socially inept, excessive feelings of shame, or self-direction issues, which include the reluctance to pursue goals, unwilling to take risks or engage in new activities involving interpersonal contact. So, these are people who are afraid to break out of their shell. They really are afraid of being embarrassed. They don't feel like they're good enough. They are concerned that others may judge them. They are preoccupied with and sensitive to criticism and rejection. They're reluctant to engage in relationships for fear of being ridiculed. And they lack social contacts. They avoid romantic or sexual relationships. They experience atahedia, which is the lack of the ability to feel pleasure or take interest in life. And they feel anxious and they fear being embarrassed. Now, a lot of us in life, we have things that we're just not good at. We run like a spaz. We sing like a dying moose. We can't dance, any number of things. But we'll get up there, we make a fool of ourselves, we laugh, we have a good time. Folks with an avoidant personality disorder, they're not willing to try anything because they're so consumed with the idea of embarrassment that they would rather just not try. A dependent personality disorder refers to a pattern of being submissive and clingy because of an excessive need to be taken care of. In order to avoid conflict, they may have a great difficulty standing up for themselves. They find it difficult to express disagreement or make independent decisions and are challenged to begin a task when nobody is available to assist them. When someone with dependent personality disorder finds that a relationship they depend on has ended, they will immediately seek out another source of support. And this is less than 1% of the population. The next personality disorder is Obsessive-Compulsive. And this is a personality disorder that is characterized by a general pattern of concern with orderliness, perfectionism, excessive attention to details, mental and interpersonal control, and a need for control over one's environment at the expense of flexibility, openness, and efficiency. Estimates in the general population range from about 2% to 7%. Men are diagnosed with obsessive-compulsive personality disorder about twice as often as women. The underlying concept behind this personality disorder is the overwhelming desire to control their environment 100%. So, identity issues in terms of diagnostic criteria include a sense of self which is derived from work or being productive. They have a very restricted sense of strong emotions, meaning they will control their emotions like they control their environment. They have very rigid and unreasonably high and inflexible internal standards of behavior, which can make it difficult to complete tasks. In other words, nothing is ever good enough. Everything has to be perfect. They can be overly conscientious and moralistic. So everyone is a sinner except for them. So there's any number of issues that can be defined because this particular individual wants to control everything based on their standards. They have a difficulty understanding and appreciating the ideas, feelings, and behaviors of others. Their relationships are seen as secondary to work. They have a rigidity and stubbornness which affects relationships with others. And they tend to be very compulsive. They have this insistence that everything be exactly the way they want it, and in their mind, the way they want it is perfect. They are willing to sacrifice getting something done on time in order to make sure that it's 100% perfect or, in their mind, correct. They believe that there is only one way to accomplish something, and it's their way. And more importantly, they don't care how long something takes, it has to be done their way, long after the time has been functional or effective. It's like, let's create a perfect cake for a birthday party that was held last week. They don't care about the time as long as the product itself was perfect. So, when we are treating personality disorders, the primary treatment is psychotherapy or talk therapy. And what we do in this context is we learn about why people have these conditions and talk about their moods, their feelings, their thoughts, their behaviors with a mental health provider. They use insight and knowledge that the person gains to learn healthy ways to manage their symptoms and reduce behaviors that interfere with their functioning and relationships. In other words, recognize the behaviors that are dysfunctional, learn better behaviors to cope with their stress and anxiety so that their personality disorder becomes manageable. This can take place in individual counseling, group counseling, and family counseling settings. There are no medications specifically approved by the Food and Drug Administration to treat personality disorders. However, several types of psychiatric medications may help with various personality disorder symptoms, including antidepressants, anti-anxieties, meds like benzodiazepines, mood stabilizers, and antipsychotics. A personality disorder can be so severe that a patient requires psychiatric hospitalization. For example, a personality disorder where somebody resorts to cutting or self-harm, this person may need to be hospitalized so they can be stabilized, so they can care for themselves, and once they are stabilized, then the doctor may recommend a day program or a residential program or an outpatient program. So, for those of you people who might have said, hey, she's only covered 9 personality disorders, you are correct. Here's number 10. Now, the 9 that I've previously discussed are functionally very painful for people, but this 10th one, antisocial personality, is very painful for the people around the person with this disorder. People with antisocial personality disorder refers to a pattern of disregarding or violating the rights of others without feeling any guilt or any remorse. It is 3.5% of the population and predominantly male, 3 times more common in men than in women. Most prisoners meet the criteria of having antisocial personality disorder, about 50 to 80%. It is also known as being a sociopath or, in some cases, a psychopath. These folks will harass, steal from, beat up, destroy property, kidnap, or kill without the least bit of guilt. Some researchers have suggested that antisocial personality disorder is evident in high-level corporate executives such as CEOs. So the idea of having no remorse, no guilt, being able to ruin someone's life, steal their money, is the same quality that makes you a successful CEO as a successful serial killer. To be diagnosed, you must be at least 18 years old. Your self-esteem is derived from personal gain, power, and pleasure. Goal setting is based on personal gratification. There is a lack of remorse, a lack of empathy, a lack of concern for others' feelings. You are impulsive and hostile. But when you go to court, you are very good at faking remorse. You can cry a river of tears. And relationships are based on exploitation, manipulation, coercion, dominance, and intimidation. Psychosocial factors that contribute to antisocial personality disorder include poor parent-child interactions, truancy, theft, disobeying parents, frequent lying with no remorse, children who were abused sexually or physically, and a young person who was diagnosed with conduct disorder is often considered a precursor to antisocial personality disorder. Biological factors that contribute to antisocial personality disorder. So far we've only looked at the psychosocial factors. But with antisocial personality disorder, there appears to be actual biological factors that influence the development of this particular disorder. MRI scans of the brain show that people with antisocial personality disorder have 11% less brain cells in their prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for making decisions and planning and controlling our impulses. Researchers have hypothesized that damage or malformation of the prefrontal cortex increases the risk of antisocial personality disorder. So, how do we treat antisocial personality disorder? Well, unfortunately, psychotherapy is not effective. Antisocial personality disorder, people with this disorder are not feeling like there's anything wrong with themselves. They are guiltless. They don't trust anyone. They're irresponsible, and they're outstanding liars who fail to see that they're doing anything bad. They don't want to change. In a 29-year study of 71 men who were diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, it showed that 69% showed no improvement in their behavior. In other words, it is a long-term problem that needs to be managed. So, is there any pharmaceuticals that'll help? Antidepressants raise the levels of serotonin. And some researchers believe that abnormality in serotonin levels may cause these aggressive and impulsive behaviors. So, let's give people with antisocial personality disorder medications that increase the serotonin levels, like SSRIs, the antidepressants. However, and it works. It reduces the aggressive behaviors. However, as soon as the antisocial personality disorder stop taking their meds, the aggressive behaviors come right back. Other researchers show that antipsychotic drugs can help decrease impulsivity, decrease hostility, decrease aggressiveness, and decrease rage. Again, as soon as they stop taking their meds, though, all of those problems come right back. So what we see here is this constant flux of these folks who are egocentric. They don't see anything wrong with themselves, they like the way they are, and they don't want treatment. So here are the citations I have used for this PowerPoint. If you have any questions, please feel free to email or text me or leave a comment. Otherwise, have a fantastic day.